Welcome back to the channel. I'm your host for today, Claire Headley, and with me today, my guest, Jeff Beaumont. Jeff, it's such a pleasure to meet you and finally actually talk to you in person, or
I know.
virtually, right?
I feel like we've been watching each other for quite a few months and not actually connecting. So, and of
Yes,
course, emailing, which was awesome too. But it's good to
yes,
see
and
you.
I really appreciate you reaching out to have this conversation today. I'm very much looking forward to it, and I titled this episode "Life After Scientology" with Jeff Beaumont to delve into the recovery process, right? The paths that we take respectively after Scientology to put our lives back together again. At least that's how I view it personally. Quite the bumpy road here and there, right?
It can be. It's also for myself, I will say I'm pretty lucky. It's a beautiful road, or at least I've arrived at a beautiful place. So it's been worth
Amazing.
the effort.
Yes, I agree with the beautiful part. Never a day goes by that I'm not thankful to be free and enjoying the beautiful world we live in and able to do what I'd always dreamed of. So and just for anyone watching, we will be streaming this on both of our channels, Blown for Good and Jeff's channel, PTS for Life. I will link to both of our channels in the description, and we appreciate you watching.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, let's delve into it. So we were talking prior to this about specifically education, and I commented that yes, a number of our viewers on Blown for Good had asked about my path to getting my GED finally a couple of months ago, and just the path of what it looks like for education after Scientology, which I think is a very important topic. It's something I'm personally very passionate about. And now I'm delving into, now that I actually have my GED, delving into getting a college degree. So that's my next path and my next endeavor. I'm figuring out how to make that all work. And I have been talking to some amazing people about that. But yeah, let's get into this. And you have questions for me, and I'm sure I'll have questions for you, so we can go back and forth.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think the important thing to know is both of us are born in Scientology. Both of us didn't quite get the opportunity that we needed to expand upon our educational pursuits. For myself, I was fully raised in a Scientology school. I was always taught study tech. I did learning how to learn, study skills for life, basic study manual, all of them a couple times. And
Yeah.
so I think the biggest balance for me is going to be, where do I ignore the study tech and where do I actually use it? you
Right.
know,
Yes.
because
And so how old were you when you first learned about the barriers to study by L. Ron Hubbard?
I mean, it would have been probably in elementary school.
Yeah.
I have never set foot in a public school before, and it was very, very strict at the school I was at. Normal kids just daydream and fiddle and doodle and stuff, and you couldn't do any of that while you were studying.
Yeah.
So that's gonna be the thing it's been the most challenging. And I have obviously been out for a while and I have studied some stuff, but letting that go and like the mental aspect of it's still always a challenge for me.
Yeah. And plus, yes, there's the twist with the misunderstood word, let's just say as an example, where
Mhm.
if you, at least for me, growing up, I did the basic study manual when I was 6 years old the first time. And then I did the student hat when I was 12. So though I was in public school for my elementary, or in England, it's primary school experience, it was already, how I'd been programmed as a child to study. And just taking the misunderstood word, for example, the layers of programming in Scientology are that if you don't thoroughly clear a word, or you don't clear a word, that's a crime, right? As a child. I was listening to
Seems normal.
right. Yeah. Yeah. You're from such a young age. If you don't follow the rules, you're breaking them, and you're a criminal. So
Yeah.
yeah. But have you heard of Amanda Montell's book Cultish?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so she delves into all different cults and the language and semantics piece of it. But it was funny because she has sections throughout the book specifically about Scientology, and
Mm.
her I'm paraphrasing, but her statement was that her understanding of word clearing when it was described to her, which is of course there's many different methods in Scientology, but this is how you uh, come to understand all the meanings of words and use them in sentences and the derivation and blah blah blah. And Amanda's statement was that it's one of the most exotic forms of gaslighting she's ever heard of. I was
Yeah.
like, if you think about it, like even when you're reading obviously I'm talking about when we were in Scientology and you're reading out loud, any stumble, anything means that you absolutely have a word you do not understand, and you're not going to continue until you say what word you don't understand. Which
Yeah.
to me as a child, I just fought that for the longest time, and then finally it was just just go with it.
Well, and the more you fight it, the more words you have to look up. And
Right.
then like on that kind of note, like I remember one of the most traumatic experiences in the academy. I think it was on the student hat, and I was 15 or something like that, maybe 16. But the supervisor, who was Golden Age Tech trained, very recently from Flag, um, he kept checking for words, and I was like protesting like crazy. Like, I'm fine. He might have saw me yawn or something.
Mm-hmm.
And I was protesting so hard that he actually pulled me out of the course room and put me on a meter and started basically a little confessional, like asking very pointed questions. And one of them was like, "Are you masturbating?" And of course, I'm a 16-year-old kid. It's like, yeah, I had hormones, but like any kind of severe protest to their techniques are met with absolute authority, you
Yeah.
know. And that it's got such a note in my mind about that,
Yes.
you know.
Understandably, for sure. It's I mean, we could talk for days about, you know, breaking down each aspect of Scientology training, the study techniques, and all that. And even compared to the early, the check sheets I did in the 80s, then the ones in the 90s, then golden age of tech, golden age of knowledge, that whole evolution and
Yeah.
change on what Scientology even looks like when you're studying it and learning it. It's quite a history, really, if you think about it.
Yeah, it's the most complicated cult I think that ever exists. There's so
Right.
many layers to it, you know. And
Yeah.
even like the course that I just did, the cult foundational course that you guys granted for me, listening to Dr. Stephen Hassan talk about um, examples of cult behavior and then bringing up Scientology. The first one, I was like, oh, yeah, right. He's actually mentioning Scientology. So, of course, he is. Because
Yes.
it's like almost like the standard now of the most complicated, elaborate cult that exists, right? So
Yes.
it's fascinating, and it's really good to learn about it. I think it empowers you so much to talk about and learn about this type of stuff, to know what happened to you.
Yes. Absolutely, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. You reminded me that when we were living in LA, after we'd gotten out of Scientology, we were having dinner with some friends, and one of them was in college, and she was telling us about this whole study that her class had done on high control coercive groups, cults, etc. And she said what struck her the most and was most fascinating was that at every study they looked at was that recovery from Scientology was like 10x longer than recovery from any other high control group. I mean, I think I think it's relative to one's experience, but nonetheless, like you say, it's layer upon layer of programming, smoke and mirrors, and programming to the point that you start doing the work in your own mind to keep yourself there. So, as much as I had to physically escape, I also had to mentally escape and emotionally escape. It wasn't just physical.
Yeah, and I think circling back to the education part of it, and the indoctrination, even 10 years after leaving, I still think about the study tech when I'm reading anything, even if it's just for like a book that's
Yeah.
just some nonfiction book that means nothing, and I still think, oh shit, I should probably look up that word. And, and just got to get over it. But it's self policing because
Yeah.
you know that if you don't do it, it's going to get enforced upon you by the
Yeah.
supervisor or whatever. So it's very
Yeah.
insidious.
Yeah, no, it for sure is. And I don't think there's anything wrong with improving one's vocabulary. I mean, L. Ron Hubbard did not invent the dictionary, for crying out loud. but there's different methods of study. And like speaking for myself, I'll be reading a book on my Kindle. And I love the fact that I can just touch the word and it pulls up the definition of the word, and Bob's your uncle and I'm on my way. I'm not using it in sentences and, all of that, but it does help to better understand the context.
Absolutely. And,
Yeah.
I'm not against looking up words.
Yeah.
I shouldn't say looking up words. I don't know if that's a Scientology term or not, but I guess
Good
clearing
question.
words is.
Yeah.
Um, that's a good question. Maybe someone in the chat or in the comments there can let us know. As a never in, do you use the
Is
term looking up a word?
right. Yeah, good question. I don't know the answer to that either.
Anyway, point being,
Talking about
is
semantics and peeling back the layers. That's a good
yeah,
one. Yeah.
yeah, and like I don't know what normal people use as far as terminology, but I will look up a word like egalitarianism. I didn't know what that meant when I was studying, and I looked it up. I'm like, cool. Oh, okay, so it's that, and just moved on.
Yeah.
Whereas I didn't have to clear every definition. I didn't have to make sentences, no derivation. I don't care. I
Right.
couldn't like I couldn't care less where that word came from. I just need to know what it meant. What's it mean in this context? And I can move on. So
Yeah, and nor were you
it's a
being
good feeling.
forced to learn the meaning of the word because of a yawn or,
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe I'm just tired.
Yes, exactly. And so what has inspired your interest in circling back to education?
It was never afforded to me when I was younger. Like I left school pretty early when I originally was recruited for the Sea Org. I didn't actually like school that much, but I think that was more of a product of the school I was in
Yeah.
versus and the environment of the school because it had gotten pretty toxic. Um, really bad teachers, bad principal, and they're all still in Scientology. um, and so, not having that opportunity, I just kind of always did manual labor work and so forth. And I don't have that in me these days. I've done it for so long that my body just doesn't like it. And so looking forward, I evaluated kind of what I wanted to do, what I wanted to be, where I saw myself in 10, 15 years. And the only thing that really came up was I wanted to be helping people. Um, then I connected with a mentor and a friend of mine named Janice Selby, who is a counselor in Kelowna, British Columbia. She runs uh, a cult recovery group. It's online that we go to every Tuesday, and I really wanted to become a part of that healing process for people, even though
Nice.
it's not counseling itself, like it's not therapy. It's just a bunch of people who had similar experiences, who happen to have someone who has some tools
Yeah.
that can help them. Um, I've also started going to the Safe Portland meetings. There's
Yes.
a Scientology specific one, which is amazing, as well as a any cult recovery type 1, and SAFE stands for Spiritual Abuse Forum for Education. And
Nice.
it's just a matter of giving people tools and listening to people, and that just really resonates with me. I just want to recognize what I've been through and try and help other people get out of it as well.
That's amazing. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And so the Safe Portland, obviously, I know about the group. I'm curious what the format of the support group is.
Yeah, for sure. So it's pretty casual. The original starting of it was more of like a happy hour get together at usually a McMinimans, which is a kind of a staple in Portland area, and they just get to know each other. There will be a little bit of guided communication about a certain topic for that week, and it's very casual, just a bunch of people supporting each other.
Nice.
The ex-Scientologist one specifically, with Scientology being very particular about how elaborate it is, a
Yeah.
lot of times we'll have a very specific topic about Scientology that we're talking about.
Yeah.
Originally, SAFE was designed for people who are just leaving, and so there will be like, hey, what's your first steps, and how do you get over this specific thing as you're leaving? But depending on who comes, it'll change what you actually talk about.
Yes. Makes sense.
And it's just support. It's just knowing that you're not alone, which is unbelievably empowering
Yes.
when you don't know that's a thing. you know, because
Yeah,
leaving a cult is a very traumatic experience.
for
Like
sure.
you've lost with Scientology, you've lost everything,
Yes.
all your contacts, all your family, and to know that you're not alone is probably the most empowering thing one can do.
Yes. Yeah, in my case, I was incredibly lucky that I left 3 weeks after Mark. So obviously I had Mark, but everything else I'd ever known, every friend I'd ever had, my entire family, of course, disconnected from me the day after I escaped. So you're right. It's incredibly isolating. And also I would say that even the programming within Scientology is so isolating that you think you're the only one that's having
Hmm.
these bad thoughts, or doesn't want to be there, or there's something wrong with you. And then when you connect with people outside, you find out, oh no, everyone else was having the exact same thoughts as I was.
Yep. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
brutal. Like when I stand outside of an org now, and I'm not protesting much right now, but I went back to my original org and I saw all the usual people. It's all the same faces that are there from when I was on staff and when I literally grew up inside the organization itself. And I just want to grab them and just shake them, be like, I know the thoughts you're having.
Right.
I had those too, but they can't because they'll get in trouble.
Yeah.
And it's brutal.
I
And they're
know.
worried about their spiritual salvation,
Right.
right? Like it's so all consuming. It's their
Yeah.
entire future. And I just wish I could say something to them, but I don't know what that could be.
The day will come. At least
I
they
know.
know they have you. And never give up
Yep.
hope. That's what I believe in. Never.
Yeah.
I will forgive my mother if she ever asks me to. Even with the hate videos she's done, I mean, for it's been 18 years for us of sometimes really vicious attacks that
Yeah.
she's been involved in as well. So, but also I know that it's mind control. It's not her. But yeah, I understand that frustration. And I really applaud your efforts to delve into this field and help people because it's so needed, so important, and like you said, such a huge part of recovery.
Yeah.
Um, anyway,
I really
yeah,
want to know that any ex-Scientologist who is out there, I want them to know that there's someone that at the very least can understand where they're coming from and
yeah,
have hopefully some tools for them to help. Um, because, as as has been said many times, going to a therapist and trying to explain Scientology and how it works, and all the nuanced details of it, it would eat up hundreds of hours if you really
Yes.
wanted to understand it. And so to have
Yes.
someone there, an advocate that can maybe reach out to, even if they weren't seeing me as a therapist and just wanted someone to reach out to, I think the more people we can have that's available for that, it just empowers everybody. That's all I want to
Absolutely.
do. So
Yeah, we've been working on a project at the Aftermath Foundation since last year with two psychologists, one who is a professor at Yale and the other who's a psychologist at UCLA. And they actually have been putting together a therapist fact sheet to really, like a kind of a short form education on the pitfalls that you're facing in trying to help a Scientologist, which I think is an amazing and a beautiful project. But there's so much room for things like that. So it's, navigating all of this is challenging, to be sure. But yes, I mean, I've seen different therapists in the, here and there over the years since leaving. My current therapist she's not particularly well versed in the Scientology belief system, but I think that I've made enough progress in my own recovery that I better explain what I'm going through without using the language and the terminology of
yeah,
Scientology. But it's a work in progress.
as we all will be for the rest of our lives.
Yeah. Yep, for
Yeah,
sure.
cool.
Yeah. And so you did this course. So what's next on your path? And what other concerns do you have that you think it would be good for us to talk about?
Yeah, well, I mean, my next step is going to be to become the counselor that I want to be. Um, that the foundational course for the cults was amazing, and I'm really glad that I did it beforehand because now I can go into the further training with that in mind.
Awesome.
And I think that's the point of it. Like that was what Dr. Hassan said,
Yes.
was that before you see the person, consider the fact that they might be under some sort of undue influence, and keep that in mind with all your whatever modality of therapy you go with, right?
Yeah.
And so that's my goal. I start my course as of today, as we're recording this, which is August 6th. I started in 12 days. It's a 1 year
Awesome.
course, and that's my next step. I'm also creating art. I have recently opened up that part of me, and this one back here uh, is actually one of my pieces here.
Nice.
And
That's
so
awesome.
my goal is to expand that part of me, because that's another part of me that was not allowed to flourish and prosper,
Yeah.
to use a Scientology term.
Right.
Um, and yeah, but my main concern in going to school is going to be learning how to learn as a
Hmm.
normal person.
Yeah.
You know, like what does a study day look like? I haven't had that before. So that's
Right.
going to be the interesting thing.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. And I'm sure that um, I think any good teacher is also a mentor, which is very different than the concept we grew up with being in Scientology. A supervisor was just somebody who was there to make sure you did the steps of the check sheet. And having, so I would say vicariously through my children now being in school. And as I mentioned, my oldest son graduated high school in May. Yay.
Yay.
um, but I've seen the importance of teachers as mentors, so much
Mhm.
so, and met some incredible people who really, really care and are there to help and to lean into. And I'm sure that I'm sure you'll have a very different experience than your experience in a Scientology course room out in the real world. I've never ceases to amaze me how many amazing people there are in this world. Incredibly knowledgeable, incredibly caring, empathetic, everything else. Anyway, so I'm excited to see you take this journey and see where it leads.
Yeah, me too. And I am nervous, I will say. I do have, I think one of the things I need to work on as I'm going through it is the self confidence and belief in self that I can retain the information and be as good as I can possibly be. I'm
Yeah.
not going to strive for perfection because I know that is impossible. And I won't necessarily always strive for 100% on the test like I did in Scientology, where if you don't if you don't get a certain mark, you have to do a full retrain or a full retread, you know.
Yeah.
um, I'm going to go in it with, and I think this is really important, at least for myself, I'm going in it not for the idea of remembering things, but for understanding it in a applicable setting,
Yes.
you know. So it's, I'm not an academic. I don't care about having letters behind my name. It makes zero difference to me.
Right.
I just want to be able to have that toolbox that's full of a lot of really cool tools, and so it can be more of an application type thing as
Yeah.
opposed to a theoretical, highfalutin education type thing, you know.
Right. Well, what strikes me as you're talking is that you have a goal in mind and a reason, skills that you're looking to attain to help you accomplish a specific purpose. So it's, if you compare to in Scientology, it's for titles or levels or this or that, the other thing. It's not that. And there are people who study for titles out in the real world, of course, or the PhDs, and hats off to them. But I think
Mhm.
you'll find you will succeed because of the reason you're doing it in the first place.
Yeah. And that is the first barrier to learning, is it not?
Yes.
Oh, it hurts that I remember that after all these years, but
Hey, you know what? I can relate. If you just gave me 1 minute, I would be rattling off the barriers, all the symptoms of misunderstood word, lack of mass, all of that, not because I want to or because I believe in it, but because if you've learned something from the age of 4, 5, 6, in my case, and said them over and over and over for 30 years. I was in Scientology for 30 years. I would love to be able to forget those. It's just never going to happen realistically.
it's taking up valuable real estate in that head of yours.
Yeah, exactly. So,
It's like remembering the lyrics to a song from the 90s. It's like, why do I need to know this? And, you
yeah,
know, why is that even taking up any brain space? But
yeah.
nothing you can do about it.
No, I know. And at least hopefully it's the part of the brain that, doesn't take up that much space.
True that. True that.
I don't know. It becomes such an automaticity of, even like you said, lyrics or, the definition of a team or, all these other things. Like it's kind of scary when you consider that those things are indelibly committed to memory for most former Scientologists.
Yeah. Well, especially if they were on staff for a long period of time and had to do Chinese school and all that stuff. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, I always thought, and I'm curious what you thought about this when you were in. Did you see Chinese school, which is where, for anyone who's watching, where you rattle off verbatim? There's someone yelling out a verbatim phrase, um, and then you have to repeat it over and over again as a group. Um, did you ever see that as problematic while you were doing it? Like, I always got the sense like this seems really strange to be doing
Huh.
this. Like, why are we doing this? What
Yeah.
was your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So I do remember feeling awkward doing it as a child. I think in my
Mm,
case, because my mom joined the Sea organization when I was 4. So I was in the cadet org from age 4 to age 10. Very, very impressionable years, of course. and we would do Chinese school on a regular basis. And so I didn't enjoy doing it. I didn't like doing it. But even at that young age, I didn't question it, you know,
Hmm.
mainly because you follow the rules or you risk losing everything. You know, there were cadets who weren't allowed to speak to their parents, and my mom was a single mom, so I was definitely a rule follower from age 4, simply because, not because I was a fanatical believer. In fact, as a young during those same years being in public school, I longed to just have a normal life. It was never, I never considered Scientology something that I chose. It was just, you're born into it, and you know, you deal with the hand you make the best of the hand you're dealt.
Hmm.
So I think that I was doing it from such a young age that I didn't even ever have that critical thought of like, why are we doing this? But yes, of course, looking back on it, incredibly problematic. Um,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I guess I had thoughts about it being at least kind of problematic when I was in my later years at on staff at a class 5 org.
Yeah.
It always seemed so, I guess it was more militaristic than I was used to in our org, you know, and a lot of it I think came back when there was like more higher trained tech terminals that came from Flag, or like a mission would come through and try and get ethics in on the org. You know, why isn't it expanding and so forth? And I guess when it would become to the point where it was like really, really rigid, that's when it became problematic to me, as
Yeah.
opposed to just like every now and then, you
Right.
know?
Yeah. Understandably. I mean, it's unique. Well, as you're talking, you're giving me flashbacks of the aspect of Scientology. It's always the people's fault, the staff fault. It's never, well, why isn't Scientology expanding? Because it's not for everybody, and you have to have millions of dollars to get to the higher levels. You know, simple questions like that, or simple facts like that, or you know, it's not really a religion, it's a business, and we're just, you know, anyway, on and on. um but yeah, that kind of like, there's always something wrong with you if things are not going as they should be going, is absolutely day in day out the life of a staff member, no matter what level you're at.
Yeah, I mean, there are support groups that I'm part of that have, you know, staff from all levels, and it's just fascinating to hear that the stories were all the same, just slightly different, but basically the same. You know,
Yeah.
again, it makes you feel not alone, which is
Yeah,
good.
for sure. Yeah.
You know,
I meant to ask you too, so what year did you get out?
um, technically, 2012.
Okay.
I had kind of gotten out and then got sucked back in, and then fully out in 2012. Yeah.
Okay. Do you mind if I ask, what do you think has been the most helpful to you in that path of getting out? And obviously you're still on the path. I'm just curious if there's specific things that were really markers for you of starting to unravel the mess.
A mess, you say? Yes,
I do.
definitely. Yeah, I mean, so education, YouTube, to be honest, like YouTube's like the biggest thing that helped me in the recovery. Multiple creators, and just kind of obviously knowing I wasn't alone, and then
Mhm.
finding out what Scientology really does and is. Um,
Yeah.
when you talk about watching YouTube videos that cover like the exact topics, like let's say study tech or OT levels or whatever,
Yeah.
you find out what those are. But it doesn't. I haven't really seen too many people who are focusing on the actual like cult, like what's happening underneath. It's not necessarily the OT levels or the Chinese school or whatever. but what is the undue control, undue
Mhm.
influence, and so forth. And like obviously Dr. Stephen Hassan and John Atack and, you know, multiple other people, but not that many really focusing on that. And I think that's what's really changed for me, was finding out that information.
Yeah.
It's almost like, oh, that's a clock. Neat. It's a clock. It tells the time. But then opening it up and then seeing the gears move and like, how does that happen? It's more of like, that's the analogy I would kind of give it.
Yeah.
Um, and then having a really good support structure that I
Mhm.
have been so blessed to have with my wife, Andrea, and her willingness to deal with my stuff and know that it's not um, it's not necessarily something that can be fixed right away, but if we just keep chipping away at it, I will be, better every day kind of thing. And
Yes.
it's going to have its
Awesome.
ups and downs. Yeah.
Thank you, Andrea.
100%. Yeah, she is amazing, and I am so lucky to have her. I
Yeah.
honestly would not be here if it wasn't for her. So,
Yeah. That's
yeah,
amazing.
for sure.
And she was never in Scientology.
Nope, no, she was raised
Right.
Catholic, and funnily enough, the first time that Scientology ever came up in our relationship, Andrea lived downtown, right where near where the org was, and we were driving by one day, and she looked over. We were across the street from the org, and she said Scientology, kind of joking, right?
Mhm.
And I didn't say anything. I kind of like laughed a little bit because she didn't know that I was a Scientologist at that point, and I
Okay.
just remember thinking to myself, does she know? And like she completely missed my withhold because I was not open to anybody about my past. Like I
Yeah.
didn't speak about it at all, and I just remember that missed withhold moment.
Hmm.
And then I actually didn't really discuss anything about it till about 5 years in our relationship,
Wow.
until we really started talking about it.
Yeah.
So,
And obviously my scenario is very different
mhm.
because Mark and I have been married a very long time, but I have huge respect for people like your wife, Andrea, who um, will put up with us, so to speak. I think that sometimes, uh, yes, in my case, Mark and I both understand what we've been through, but that can be a blessing and a curse, depending, or a curse, depending on the day. Um, so there's not really the I think the best perspective to take on it is we're on a road to recovery, and at least for me, obviously YouTube wasn't there was not any YouTube when I got out, but my first thing was I went on eBay and I ordered Russell Miller's Barefaced Messiah,
Yeah.
and also Messiah or Madman by Bent Corridon. I ordered those two books, and I remember
Mhm.
just feeling like, oh my gosh, like, I had it felt in my mind that I had done the unthinkable, but also in that moment. So this was back in like 2006. I just thought, I can read a book and I don't have to agree with it or disagree with it, but I can read. And that's the level that I was willing to accept information. And, again, in those early days, I was like, well, I'm just applying the multiple viewpoint system by, I can read books from everybody and hear all perspectives and all sides and decide what works for me, what's real for me, and what
Mhm.
isn't. The way I've always explained it to people is that the moment Scientology became a choice for me, I chose I wanted nothing further to do with it. And that was in 2006.
Yay. That was, yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of people left around then, didn't they? I feel like
Yes.
there's been kind of ebbs and flows of people leaving.
Yeah.
Um, so, what was I going to ask you? What was the feeling when you first started reading that book? Either whichever one you read first. I remember when I first started looking at stuff online, I felt a pretty severe sense of guilt,
Hmm.
like I was doing something really wrong. I'm
Yeah.
curious how you felt.
Yeah, so the guilt actually for me was more so during our lawsuit. So we had filed a lawsuit in January 2009, and then that was going on for 4 years. And of course, we eventually lost after appeal. Nonetheless, I'm glad it turned out the way it did, because in the final ruling, the judge said, had we pursued other causes of action, false imprisonment, assault and battery, things of that nature, we might have fared differently. But of course, Scientology tried to gag us and make us commit to never speaking publicly about Scientology ever again, which we refused to do. But so during the deposition, the depositions took place over 2 to 3 years. It was like 4.5 days total of just grueling, awful. It really brought trauma to the surface for me personally. And so one day I was driving my kids to preschool. They were 4 and 2 at the time, and I was just bawling my eyes out. This was the day after one day of deposition. And that was in that moment, I was like, that's it. I'm going to go talk to a therapist. This is not, and I was trying to protect my kids from my grief. Like, I had this thing, like, I cannot have them see me upset, which was funny, because then the therapist was like, why not? Like, well, because I don't want them to think I'm sad. And she was like, we have good days and we have bad days. It's actually good for children to see their parents processing emotions, and that it's not the end of the world if you have a bad day, which was incredible to me. But during that deposition, I had such an incredible sense of guilt. Like, I was doing something wrong by spilling the beans on my experiences. And I talked with my therapist about that too. And it was funny because she said, well, is it like you're the kid in the sandbox and you're telling on the teacher? I was like, no, it's like we're all in the sandbox. Like, they're in the playground too. Anyway, it was whatever. It's, but I absolutely can relate to what you were experiencing there. I think when I started reading the books, I don't know that I had guilt so much as like, what am I going to find out? And especially Barefaced Messiah just so methodically breaks down the true facts of L. Ron Hubbard's life that, it was mind-boggling to me to know that everything I'd ever been, pretty much, obviously there's slivers of things here and there, but I'd been sold a whole bunch of lies. And that was kind of the first step to, well, wait a minute, if this is a lie, then what else and what else and what else? And, of course, Mark and I both had very different paths within Scientology. And so also within the first few months of us leaving, he was watching the South Park episode, the famous South Park episode, which I was too scared to watch at that time. And
why were you scared?
I think because I was still holding on to hope that one day I might get my family back. Of course, that was complete pie in the sky, but I don't know. In that moment, I was like, well, I can't unsee it. I can't unwatch it. And, I still think I was still certainly very afraid of Scientology and OSA, and, and not without cause, frankly. I mean, of course, we found out years later, yes, they were walking by our house every single day, many times while I was alone with a newborn baby. And yes, they were tapping our phones. And yes, they were taking our trash and all of this. So, to find out that things that I thought, oh, I'm just being paranoid, were actually true. Actually, it helped to bring focus and perspective, and made me realize how important it was to speak out against Scientology, which has been a huge part of my own recovery.
Yes, absolutely. I would concur.
Yeah.
Making myself known to all the people that I once stood shoulder to shoulder with has been scariest and one of the most powerful experiences in my life. Um, because for a long time, I was just kind of there out in the field. I was disaffected, PTS or sour, as they label me in the computer. But I wasn't declared. You know, there was no public announcement that I was not that it was anti Scientology, and by
Right.
making that very known, um, obviously empowered me, but also made me realize that even though HCO and DSA locally, the powers that be there at our local org, knew that I was doing this, nobody else did. And it
Mm-hmm.
just goes to show you the level of secrecy that happens on every level, you know, like
Right.
they don't spread any N theta. So making myself known was just like, here you go, guys, this is me.
Yeah.
And it felt good. So,
Yeah, no, I'm sure. And of course, that was done for us in our case because we were declared the day after I escaped.
right. That was
And
fast. How did that
yeah,
comment go?
more common. No, crazy story though.
Mm,
So we left in January 2005. So Mark escaped on January 4th, and I followed him on January 21st or 22nd. I don't have a calendar in front of me, but thereabouts on a Monday, fateful Monday. Um, and then about a week later, after I had made it to Kansas City and reunited with Mark, I sent an email. Actually, no, I called OSA and I said, "Hey, I blew. I escaped, and I'm trying to figure out what to do so that I don't lose my family." And so, Kirsten Catano, of course, who's well known from Office of Special Affairs, called me, and then Greg Wilhare from Religious Technology Center called me, and they said, "Well, it's on hold," which was a lie. All you have to do is come back and get a sec check, an interrogation, and route out standardly, which of course you and I both know the goal of that is to make you change your mind.
yep.
Um, and then you won't be declared. It's on hold. And so it's crazy to me to think, I mean, we already had, but this was like 3 weeks out. So Mark's dad helped us sign a lease on an apartment because, of course, we had zero credit, no money, no nothing. We had both gotten jobs right away. Anyhow, so they're telling us we need to go back and get sec checked. And I honestly, I entertained it. I did because I was so desperate to get my family and to not lose my family. Anyway, needless to say, so I wrote back to them and said, "Okay, well, we're not going back to the headquarters in Hemet, out of the question. Uh, Tell me what it would look like if we were to come to LA and do your process." And I didn't hear anything back. And then about 2 months later, oh, and I found out the reason why is because Greg Wilhare was busted and put onto heavy manual labor, so he wasn't allowed to respond to my email. I found that out later. But so then, like 2 months after that, Warren McShane, who's the head legal guy in Religious Technology Center, David Miscavige's right-hand man, calls. So now it's like March. So we've been out 2 months. We've gotten sleep. We've watched every movie we could get our hands on. We had the very early Netflix subscription, and we were watching like 3 movies a night after work. And anyhow, Warren calls and says, "So listen, you need to come back and do the rehabilitation project for us. Otherwise, you're declared." And we were like, "Okay, see ya. That's done. We're
Bye.
out." Bye. Hell to the
That's
no.
hilarious.
Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, crazy,
Well,
crazy,
funnily
crazy.
enough, not that long ago when I was in Ontario, I actually stopped by the CLO and I asked to see the Continental Justice Chief.
Yep.
Because obviously I'm persona non grata in Scientology, and they refused to come out.
Wow.
It's my only terminal.
Yes, right? Exactly.
Yeah. They told me I had to send it in writing. It's like, okay.
Yeah, I've heard that a lot lately from many different people, that they're told no phone calls, no nothing. If you want to talk to Mike Ellis, International Justice Chief, you have to send him a snail mail letter, not even by email, but it has to be an
Right.
actual printed mailed letter. How ridiculous is that?
Yeah. I wouldn't wait up for that one.
Yeah, no. Don't hold your breath for any response.
Yeah. No, it's brutal.
Awesome. Well, did you have any other questions on your list for today?
No, I think we covered everything I wanted to talk about. It was just good to be
Awesome.
able to sit down and chat with you.
Yeah, no, likewise. We should absolutely do more down the road, and keep me posted on your progress. Best of luck to you. I know you're going to do amazing.
Thank you. I appreciate that very much.
Absolutely. Awesome. Until next time. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for watching. If you'd like to help support the channel, feel free to check out the merch store link in the description. We have Hail Xenu, Xenu is my homeboy, and BFG branded mouse pads, shirts, mugs, all sorts of other stuff in there that helps us to bring you new content on a regular basis. You can also pick up a copy of my book, Blown for Good, Behind the Iron Curtain of Scientology, in hardback, Kindle, and Audible versions as well. There's also a link to our podcast, and you can get that on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you'd like to watch another video, you can click on this link right here, or you could click on this one here, or you can click on the subscribe button right here. Thanks a lot. Until next time.